Please go slow. I'm about to unravel again." I whispered the words, barely a rasp against the thrumming silence of the room. His hand, heavy and knowing, moved with an almost cruel slowness against the small of my back, sending a jolt through me that wasn't pain but something far more dangerous. It was an electrical surge, a current that bypassed years of numbness, years of carefully constructed walls, and went straight to the part of me I thought was dead. Oh God, that tremor. That dangerous, exhilarating tremor. I didn't stop him. How could I not, when his lips, warm and impossibly soft, brushed against the jagged scar on my hip, like it was sacred, like it was a map to something precious, something hidden and aching. Not when I finally dared to look into his eyes, those deep, intense pools of midnight blue, and saw it. Not pity, not duty, not even simple lust, but something ancient, something that spoke of a long-denied hunger, a profound yearning that mirrored my own. He wasn't looking at me like a patient, not like a broken thing that needed gentle handling, but like a woman, a real woman, a woman he'd been aching to reclaim, to touch, to consume for years. And in that shattering, incandescent instant, the whole damn world, the one I had so meticulously rebuilt piece by painful piece, began to crumble around me, irrevocably, unstoppably. It was inevitable, really, a catastrophe waiting to happen. I just hadn't known how catastrophic the collapse would be, how utterly, deliciously devastating, until his breath, hot and ragged, feathered against my neck, sending shivers down my spine that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with a desperate, burgeoning desire. My lungs constricted, starved for air, yet I couldn't pull away. It was a terrifying, beautiful trap, and I was falling into an abyss of forbidden pleasure. The air in the cabin was thick, heavy with unspoken desires, with the earthy scent of pine from the logs in the fireplace, and something else. Something illicit and raw, something primal and undeniable hanging between us like a physical entity. My own breath caught a gasp trapped in my throat, a silent plea for more, for everything, for absolute surrender. I felt myself leaning into his touch, an almost unconscious movement, a desperate, silent offering of myself. My mind screamed at me, "Stop this! What are you doing? This is insanity. You are utterly insane." Vivian, but my body, that traitorous vessel that had defied me for so long, since the accident now betrayed me in a different way, humming with a forbidden current, a furious, undeniable energy that vibrated through my bones. His thumb, rough and calloused from honest labor, grazed the incredibly sensitive skin just beneath the hem of my thin pajama shorts, and I bit back a cry, a moan, that threatened to spill forth and shatter the fragile control we both clung to by a thread. This wasn't right. This wasn't sane. This wasn't what decent people did. This wasn't what mothers did, or what a woman in my position should ever consider. But for the very first time in what felt like an eternity, in what was truly a lifetime of numb existence, I felt alive. Really, truly, terrifyingly, exquisitely, dangerously alive. This wasn't just about the physical sensation of touch. It was about recognition, about being seen in a way I hadn't been seen since the world had cruelly collapsed beneath me all those years ago. The tremor intensified, a seismic shift deep within my core, reverberating through every cell of my being, tearing down every last wall. He leaned closer, his dark head bowed hair falling into his eyes, obscuring his expression, yet his intent was crystal clear, burning through the dim light. His breath was steady, deep, like he was trying to ground himself in every single motion, trying desperately to hold on to a semblance of control. But I wasn't grounded. I was floating completely adrift on a vast, dangerous sea of sensation, losing all anchors to reality, willingly drowning. I closed my eyes tightly, desperately, and leaned back further into his embrace. The old recliner creaking beneath me, a soft groan that somehow mirrored the quiet rising sound in my own throat, a sound of longing. When his fingertips brushed just beneath the hem of my cotton shorts, a searing flame ignited deep within me, a heat that spread like wildfire through my veins, consuming me whole. My breath hitched a sharp intake, not from fear or surprise, but from something I hadn't felt in years, a profound sense of permission, a silent, desperate, utterly shocking permission that shattered my world. "Tell me if this is too much," he murmured, his voice low, husky, a rough caress that sent another wave of shivers through me, electric and exquisite. Not commanding, not hesitant, just profoundly, dangerously aware and waiting. He was waiting for my answer, for my surrender. "It's not." I whispered back the words, barely audible, a fragile thread of sound in the suddenly charged air, a confession that tasted like freedom and sin, both intoxicating and terrifying. "Not nearly enough. Oh God, no, not nearly enough." My voice, raspy and raw, was a stranger to my own ears, trembling with an emotion I couldn't name. His fingers found the sensitive crease where my thigh met my pelvis, moving with excruciating care, but with no apology, no hesitation, only a relentless pursuit. My legs, those useless aching limbs that had betrayed me so many times since the accident, now trembled uncontrollably, not from weakness, but for a very different reason, a reason that sent a flush of heat through my entire body, a blush of forbidden pleasure. And when his lips followed soft, reverent, utterly deliberate pressing just above the ugly puckered scar near my hip, a permanent, hideous reminder of my shattered past, a mark of my brokenness, I forgot every name I'd been called since the accident: patient, dependent, burden, broken, invalid. In that incandescent, terrifying moment, I was none of those things. I was a woman being desired, a woman being seen, being touched, being undressed by a man who had waited too long, endured too much, denied himself too fiercely to finally admit he wanted me. His mouth found the underside of my breast, his warm breath seeping through the thin fabric of my worn nightshirt, igniting a fire that consumed me, a yearning that had been dormant for too long. I arched into him, a silent, primal plea for more, for everything, for oblivion, for redemption in this forbidden act. And when my fingers slid through his thick, dark hair, gripping, pulling him closer desperately without thought or restraint, he groaned. A low, raw sound, torn from deep within him, not of control, but of profound, beautiful surrender. A surrender that echoed my own, intertwining us in a dangerous dance. "I've thought about this." He confessed, his voice muffled against my chest, rough with emotion, raw with the truth, for too long, so much longer than you know. Every single damn day since I first came here. I didn't ask when it started. I didn't want to know the precise moment this forbidden seed had been planted. Because whatever line we'd crossed, whatever sacred boundary we'd pulverized into dust, whatever silent pact we'd broken, we weren't turning back. There was no going back. That ship had sailed, burned, and sunk into the depths. He lifted me, then not gently, not roughly, but with the innate ease of someone who knew every fragile, scarred part of me, every tender point, every hidden vulnerability, and still miraculously believed I was whole, worthy, desirable. My body settled beneath his on the worn sofa, the same familiar spot where we'd once spent countless mundane evenings, watching old movies and folding laundry, utterly oblivious to the dangerous undercurrents, simmering between us to the truth, waiting to explode. But this was no ordinary evening. This was an unveiling. This was a rebellion, The forgotten candle we'd neglected to blow out flickered nearby, its flame, casting a dancing, intimate glow across the scarred landscape of my thighs, my stomach, the soft, yielding skin above my ribs, illuminating every flaw, every story, etched on my skin. And when Julian kissed each of them slowly, deliberately, lingeringly, tracing the desolate geography of my brokenness, with his lips, with his reverence, with a worship that both terrified and thrilled me, I felt every shattered piece of me begin to stitch itself back together, right there. In the strong, comforting, utterly illicit arms of the boy I had watched grow into a man who now held my fragile world in his capable, forbidden hands. Somewhere in the middle of that searing heat, that breathless stillness, the forgotten world outside the cabin's thick walls, and the primal rhythm of our bodies, rediscovering a language we had both forgotten, a language of pure sensation and desperate connection. There was no before. There was no after. There was only this moment. Just a night that refused to pretend any longer, a night that tore down every pretense, every polite fiction, every rule. It was messy. It was wrong by every societal measure, every moral code. It was terrifying in its raw honesty, its stark reality. And it was real. More real than anything I had felt in years, more real than any photograph I had ever captured, more real than the life I had been living. Back in the hushed, candlelit room, his name, Julian, slipped from my lips like a confession, a prayer, a desperate plea, a secret whispered to the universe. He whispered mine, Vivian, in return, not like a son to a mother, not like a caretaker to the broken, not like a duty, but like a man who had finally tasted what he'd denied himself for far, far too long, and found it irresistible, intoxicating, life-affirming. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of regret, no. The strange, shocking truth was, I didn't regret a single second of that night, not one touch, not one whispered word. Not because of fear, not yet. But because my body, after years of desolate numbness, after years of feeling like a ghost in my own skin, finally remembered how to feel, how to burn, how to crave. Every nerve ending sang a vibrant, terrifying chorus of awakening, a symphony of rediscovered life. Julian lay beside me on the couch, one arm draped possessively across my waist, his breath steady against the back of my neck, anchoring me to this new, startling, dangerous reality. The same boy I used to lift onto my hip after scraped knees and spilled cereal bowls was now impossibly taller than me, broader, a man whose formidable weight didn't crush me, but steadied me, held me, anchored me to this new, dangerous ground, a silent, powerful guardian. I watched the ceiling fan spin lazily above us, its blades creaking against the profound quiet, the only sound in the universe a testament to the stillness, and wondered when the line had disappeared, or if there ever truly was one, a clear, distinct line between what was right and what was this overwhelming, unsanctioned connection. Maybe what we'd done was born not of impulse, not a sudden, reckless act, but of accumulation, of years of unspoken closeness, of unspoken understanding, of a shared loneliness, a gaping void in our lives. Neither of us dared to name aloud a chasm that only now found its terrifying bridge. He shifted in his sleep, a subtle movement, his fingers tightening slightly around my stomach, a silent, almost desperate gesture, like he didn't want me to slip away, to vanish with the dawn, to become a phantom once more. And for a second, a fleeting, precious second, I didn't feel like a mistake. I felt chosen, cherished, desired, loved. But morning, oh morning, has a way of making truth feel heavier, sharper, undeniable, dragging you back to the harsh light of reality. It has a brutal clarity that the soft, forgiving shadows of night often conceal. By sunrise, I was dressed again. I moved quietly, carefully, almost stealthily, like a thief in my own home, trying desperately not to wake him, trying to buy myself a few more moments of this impossible, intoxicating dream before reality crashed down. I didn't know if I was trying to protect him or myself from the harsh light of a new day that was about to illuminate our secret. When he finally stirred, slowly, reluctantly pulling himself from the depths of sleep, his eyes still clouded with sleep found me in the kitchen, wrapped in my old terry-cloth robe, pouring coffee I wasn't sure I could swallow without choking on the bitter truth. "Hey," he said, his voice thick with sleep, rough with newly awakened desire, and a hint of the morning's confusion, a question hanging unspoken in the air. "You okay?" I nodded, gripping the mug tightly, knuckles white, forcing a nonchalance I didn't feel. "Are you—" My voice was strained, barely my own, a thin, reedy sound. He leaned against the doorframe, his hair, a beautiful tousled mess, his eyes soft, disoriented, but still holding that intense, raw gaze from the night before, a gaze that stripped away all my defenses, leaving me bare. "I don't think okay covers it," he admitted, a wry, almost sad smile playing on his lips, a recognition of the monumental shift that had occurred, the seismic event that had rocked our world. We sat across from each other in silence, 2 cups of untouched coffee steaming between us, a visible barrier, a chasm of unspoken words. No apologies, no reassurances, just that silence. But now it wasn't the comfortable quiet of shared history, of familiar routine, of 2 lives flowing seamlessly together. No. It was a silence that pulsed with memory, with the crushing weight of unspeakable acts, with the terrifying, exhilarating knowledge of what had transpired, of the line that had been obliterated, leaving only a dangerous precipice. I thought of what the world would say, what Arthur's family would say, their judgmental whispers like daggers tearing at my reputation, what my family, what my few remaining friends, what it would mean if anyone at all ever found out. The sheer, impossible, unbearable scandal of it all, a scarlet letter branded upon my soul. And yet, when his hand reached across the table, slow and deliberate, hesitating for a fraction of a second, before resting on mine palm to palm, I didn't pull away. I couldn't. My fingers intertwined with his, a silent pact, a desperate, defiant bond. "I don't know what this is." I admitted, my voice a whisper, fragile and raw, trembling, with a mixture of fear and profound wonder, barely able to voice the terrifying truth. "I don't know what it means. It defies all logic. It defies everything I thought I knew." He squeezed my hand, not to answer, but to anchor me, to pull me back from the edge of the abyss, to steady my shaking world. "Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything." "Right now," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, almost ancient in its wisdom, a voice that carried the weight of a far older soul, a profound acceptance. I laughed, a soft, sad, surprised sound, a little breath of disbelief, a cynical chuckle at the absurdity of it all. "You always say things like that. Like you're older than me, like you've seen too much, like you know secrets." I had to grow up fast. He said, his gaze unwavering, a hint of his own pain, his own hidden burdens in his deep eyes. "So did you." A chilling truth. There was no roadmap for this. No label that didn't feel ugly or cruel or utterly insufficient to describe the tangled, complex web we had woven. We were in uncharted territory, a place where the old rules simply didn't apply, where the compass spun wildly out of control. But under the harsh fluorescent kitchen light, with toast burning forgotten in the toaster, its acrid smell filling the air, and my late husband's old cereal boxes still stacked precariously on the pantry shelf, a poignant reminder of a life that no longer existed, a life that felt like a distant dream, We weren't labels. We weren't roles. We were just two people. Two utterly lost, utterly desperate people trying to name something for which we didn't have the language. We were just us, stripped bare, vulnerable, exposed, and dangerously intertwined. I'm scared. I confessed, the words tearing from me. Finally, the admission ripping through the carefully constructed facade of my composure, raw and trembling. So am I, he said, his grip tightening on my hand, a silent promise, a shared burden. But I'm not sorry. Neither was I. The words burned on my tongue, a searing truth, but I wasn't ready to say them aloud. Not yet. The world wasn't ready to hear them, so we sat there, letting the coffee grow cold between us, the steam rising, then dissipating, mirroring our fragile, unspoken truce, our silent rebellion. We tried desperately to pretend this was just another ordinary morning in Boise, Idaho, even though we both knew deep in our bones, in every nerve ending, that nothing, absolutely nothing, nothing would ever be ordinary again. The world had irrevocably shifted on its axis, and we were caught in the wake of its seismic change, forever altered. We didn't talk about that night. Not once. Not the next morning when he made coffee before sunrise, his movements quiet, almost reverent, as if not to disturb the fragile peace we had found. Not during breakfast when he stood at the stove, flipping eggs with practiced ease, his back to me, as if nothing had changed, as if the very air between us hadn't thickened with unspoken desires, with a dangerous knowledge. Not even when our eyes accidentally met across the table, a fleeting, intense connection that burned with recognition and quickly, almost guiltily, looked away, too afraid to acknowledge the abyss we'd peered into. But something had shifted. Irrevocably. Profoundly. The silence wasn't comfortable anymore. It wasn't the kind shared between two people who know each other well, whose lives are intertwined in comfortable, predictable familiarity. No, it was the kind that vibrates, hums, waits, a pregnant silence filled with unspoken confessions and dangerous possibilities, a silence that hummed with the electricity of what had transpired and what might still come to pass, a silent agreement to carry this secret. That Monday, Julian woke up earlier than usual. I could hear the rhythmic grinding of the coffee maker before the sun even touched the kitchen windows, its golden light unable to pierce the gloom in my soul, unable to erase the memory of the previous night. When I walked in, he was already dressed, his dark hair damp from a shower, curling at the nape of his neck, wearing a gray t-shirt that clung to all the places I'd touched, a silent testament to our secret, a mocking reminder of our sin. Morning. I said, my voice carefully neutral, a practiced detachment, a brittle facade. Morning. He replied, his voice a low rumble, but he didn't look at me directly. My chest tightened, a painful vice grip squeezing the air from my lungs. We used to talk about everything, from burnt toast to the way the autumn wind howled through the porch screen, a constant flow of easy conversation, innocent and free. But now we were pretending the world hadn't tilted violently on its axis, that a chasm hadn't opened between us and the lives we once knew, lives that now seemed impossibly distant. I think I'm going to head back to the apartment tonight, he said quietly, his voice oddly flat, devoid of its usual warmth, a careful neutrality. He finally looked at me, a flicker of pain, of longing, of a desperate sadness in his deep eyes, a silent accusation, a question. You probably want your space. I nodded, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, betraying nothing of the turmoil within me. My throat was tight, choked with unsaid words. Yeah, that's probably best. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, bitter and raw betrayal to my own heart. Every fiber of my being screamed for him to stay, to never leave. He gave a half smile, one of those polite, almost mechanical ones that never quite reached his eyes, never touching the raw emotion simmering beneath the surface, a mask of composure. Didn't mean to overstay. You didn't. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to grab him, to pull him back into the safety of my impossible embrace. I miss you already. Don't go. Don't you dare leave me now, not after this. But I didn't say it. My pride, or perhaps my fear of shattering what little we had held my tongue, clamping it shut. Instead, we sat down and ate breakfast, like two strangers, two people just trying to get through the day without completely breaking apart, without dissolving into tears or confession. The monotonous clink of spoons against ceramic, the low hum of the fridge, the crushing, suffocating weight of unsaid things pressing against our throats, threatening to choke us with their silent agony. Then as I stood by the window rinsing dishes, the words a desperate plea, a last-ditch effort slipped out. Soft. Barely more than a whisper. A fragile offering. You don't have to leave if you don't really want to. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched unbearable, a tangible thing between us. Just set his coffee cup down with a soft click and walked over slowly, deliberately, stopping just behind me. Not touching, but close enough. Close enough that I felt him. Felt the heat radiating from him, a beacon in my cold, isolated world. The raw, unspoken longing in the space between our bodies, a tangible force, a current passing between us. I don't know if I deserve to stay, he said, his voice rough, thick with emotion, heavy with the burden of guilt, with the weight of our shared secret. Not after what we did, not after what I initiated. I turned to face him slowly, carefully, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of desperate hope. His expression was a raw, devastating mix of guilt, fear, and something else, something deeper, an aching tenderness wrapped tightly in shame, in profound regret, in a desperate hope. Feelings don't always arrive at the right time, I said, my voice steady, despite the wild hammering of my heart, despite the tears pricking at my eyes, threatening to spill over. But that doesn't make them wrong. It makes them real, profoundly real. For a moment, just a beat, he looked like he might cry, or laugh, or lash out, say something cruel, something that would ruin us definitively, irrevocably, tearing apart the fragile thread that bound us. Instead, he just said, "I'll think about it." And in that precise moment, a chilling clarity washed over me, a truth that cut through all the confusion and fear, slicing away all the polite lies. The thing I feared most wasn't what we'd done. It wasn't the judgment of a hypocritical world. It was pretending it hadn't happened at all. It was the lie, the insidious, soul-destroying lie that would poison us both. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted it, no. The strange, shocking truth was, I didn't regret a single second of that night. Not one touch, not one whispered word, not one moment of surrender. Not because of fear, not yet. But because I didn't know what to do with this new version of myself, this woman I had met in his arms, this passionate, defiant, uninhibited creature. She wasn't someone I had planned on becoming. She wasn't the resilient widow or the woman in recovery, or the patient waiting patiently for physical therapy milestones, clinging to a mundane, ordinary future. She was someone else, entirely. Someone alive. Someone electric. Someone reckless. Someone who demanded to be felt, to be acknowledged, to be lived. Julian didn't leave that evening. He stayed. Quietly. Respectfully. But not cold. His presence was a warm weight in the cabin, a tangible comfort, a silent anchor in a turbulent sea. We watched a movie together, barely paying attention to the flickering screen. Our knees brushed once, then again, until it no longer felt like an accident, but a deliberate magnetic pull, an unspoken language. At one point during a quiet stretch in the movie, he turned to me, his gaze intense, searching, peeling back every layer of my composure, laying my soul bare. "If we just forget it," he said, his voice low, filled with a quiet desperation, a profound wisdom, "it doesn't undo anything, it just hides it, and it will eat us alive from the inside out." And I nodded, a profound sense of truth settling over me, a truth that resonated deep within my bones, chilling me to the core with its stark honesty. Because he was right. We couldn't pretend it didn't happen. We couldn't make it neat or moral or convenient for anyone else's comfort, for society's judgment. What we shared was messy. It was quiet. It was utterly unsanctioned by the lives we were supposed to be living, the roles we were meant to play. But it was real. So incredibly, undeniably real. It wasn't about lust, not entirely. It was about being seen in the ruins of my life, in the wreckage of my brokenness, stripped bare and vulnerable, and still being wanted, desired, cherished. It was about defiance. It was about raw, beautiful, terrifying survival. It was about reclaiming a part of myself I thought was gone forever. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are already clicking away from this video, shaking your heads in disgust, calling it selfish, calling it shameful, calling me a fool. And maybe you're right. Maybe I am a fool. Maybe I am selfish. But for those of you still listening, for those of you who've ever felt truly lost in your own life, or invisible in your own skin, desperately clinging to a ghost of who you once were, I want you to know this desire isn't shameful. Denial is. We are allowed to feel. We are allowed to change. We are allowed to make mistakes. We are allowed to stumble, to fall, to rise again. We are allowed to wake up one morning, look in the mirror, and realize we're no longer willing to play the same roles we once clung to, so desperately, no longer willing to live a half-life, a shadow of existence. We are allowed to fight for our own lives, for our own happiness, for our own truth, even if that fight makes others uncomfortable, even if that fight breaks all the rules, even if that fight shatters the world you knew into a million pieces. Here's what I've learned in my long years staring down the barrel of a life I never expected to live, a life I thought was over-ended by a twist of fate. Love doesn't always arrive wrapped in a pretty bow or neatly labeled or sanctioned by society. Sometimes it shows up in sweatpants with tired eyes and a history far too complicated to name a tangled web of connections. Sometimes it's illicit. Sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it's scandalous. And healing. Healing doesn't always look like perfect recovery, like walking again, like being fixed and put back together in the way society expects. Sometimes it looks like touch. Sometimes it looks like forgiveness, not just for others, but for yourself, for the choices you make, for the desires you harbor, for the imperfections you carry. Sometimes it looks like defiance in the face of judgment, a stubborn refusal to conform. And sometimes it looks like finally telling the truth raw and unvarnished, after years of suffocating silence, breaking free from the chains of unspoken words. We didn't define what we were. And maybe, just maybe, we never will fully define it. But in that strange, quiet, electrifying space between crushing guilt and overwhelming gratitude, between boundaries irrevocably crossed and walls spectacularly torn down, I found something I didn't think I'd ever feel again. Warmth. Not just in my body, not just a fleeting spark of physical pleasure, but in the deepest, most scarred, most broken part of my soul. A warmth that promised life, new beginnings, a defiant blossoming. And sometimes, my dear friends, that's more than enough. It's everything. It's how you truly begin again, how you reclaim your own story, how you find your own impossible redemption. Thank you for letting me share my journal with you today. This story, like so many others, reminds us that life's most profound lessons often come wrapped in its messiest moments. Have you ever faced a decision that challenged everything you thought you knew about yourself? A moment where you had to choose between what was right and what felt profoundly real, even if it meant risking everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, even a little, if it made you feel something. If it stirred a question in your heart, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to Grandma's Journal for more raw, honest stories. From the heart stories that defy easy labels and celebrate the messy beauty of being human. Your support helps me keep these truths alive, one whispered confession at a time.